I've wanted a PowerBook G4 for a while now, but the prices of these computers on eBay and other used sites can command outrageous prices, even in the several £100 range for such an old computer. I picked up this example for £50 from eBay. I was fully aware that the laptop was in poor condition and required some attention in order to get it usable again. When I first got the PowerBook, I noticed just how sorry of a state that this was in. The aluminium casing was marked and scratched, and it definitely needed a clean-up. However, there appeared to be no major dents in the casing, which is something that these G4s were unfortunately prone to. The trackpad did have some wear on it, but the keyboard was in very good condition for the age, and it felt very nice to use and type on. Connecting a power adapter, I attempted to start the PowerBook, and it booted up into a fresh installation of macOS X Leopard. Opening up the system profiler revealed that this was an early 2005 PowerBook G4 with a GB of RAM memory, a 1.5 GHz PowerPC G4 processor, and the ATI Radeon 9700 graphics chip with 64 MB of VRAM. This model was one of the last to be released in the PowerBook G4 line, with only the 1.67 GHz models coming after it later in 2005. But nonetheless, I was pleased with the specification that I received. One glaring issue that you might have already spotted, however, was the condition of the LCD display. Not only did it have a line of dead pixels in the bottom right corner, it was also severely yellowed. The automatic white balance of the camera tried to compensate for this, but in person, the display image was extremely poor. I decided to waste no time in beginning the restoration process of this PowerBook, and I started by replacing the display. The display replacement process was an absolute nightmare, with the hardest part of the process being the removal of two screws at the bottom of the display. There was no way that I could remove them without further disassembling the system, but as I was going to replace the hard drive, I decided that this was okay nonetheless. The PowerBook G4 was not too hard to disassemble, especially compared to the 12-inch model of the series, but there were still lots of screws to remove, some of which were very easy to damage. But with a bit of care and patience, I was able to remove the palm rest assembly, which gave me just enough room to remove the screws at the bottom of the display. I decided to use some parcel tape to protect the chassis whilst doing this. The next step was to unclip the rear lid housing from the display itself, which was also an absolute nightmare. On some tutorials, I've seen people using tools like screwdrivers and putty knives to unclip the display assembly. I, however, chose to use some plastic panel tools and guitar picks as I didn't want to damage the aluminium or this plastic surrounding it. This did take a while, and I ended up breaking several plastic tools in the process, but I carefully was able to remove the display assembly after a while and was able to unscrew the LCD from the housing. Before putting everything back together again, I wanted to check whether the new display was working properly, so I decided to quickly test the new display out, and to my relief, everything appeared to work fantastically, and the new display was bright and sharp. Elsewhere inside the PowerBook, we have a CD-DVD combo drive manufactured in 2005 and a 120GB Samsung hard disk, which has obviously been upgraded at some point, as this originally came with an 80GB hard drive. I decided that I was going to replace this with a 250GB solid state drive. I used an M-SATA SSD inside an M-SATA to IDE enclosure, which I simply inserted into the system just like any other standard hard drive. Whilst I wouldn't be getting anywhere near the full speed of the drive because of the limited bandwidth offered by the ATA bus, the SSD would at least prove to be a bit more reliable compared to an old mechanical drive. Putting everything back together again was completely uneventful, and once the PowerBook was completely reassembled, it was time to give everything a thorough clean. I decided to use some basic antibacterial wipes and a magic eraser, which actually worked surprisingly well, removing years of dirt from the casing. It was then time to install an operating system. I wanted to install Leopard again, but I had no dual layer DVDs to hand, so I decided to install Tiger and then partition the disk to allow me to restore the Leopard DVD image onto it, so I could boot from it later. Installation of Tiger was uneventful, and opening the disk utility ensured that the new solid state drive was being properly detected as expected. This also proved that the combo drive was also properly working, as I could boot from the installation disks. The install process took about half an hour, after which the welcome video and the music played. A short while later, I was at the desktop. The next day, I was able to install OS X Leopard onto the PowerBook, and I was very impressed with how everything ran. Compared to newer MacBooks, boot time is slower, But from a laptop from 2005, I was very impressed with just how fast this G4 started, with everything ready to go in just under a minute. This model was also equipped with an ambient light sensor and a backlit keyboard, which in my opinion simply looks stunning against the silver keys, and was still bright after all of these years. I was very impressed with what just a couple of minutes of cleaning also did for this G4's outer casing. Granted, it's not the best condition PowerBook out there, but I was very impressed with the final result. Many of the minor marks and scratches were light work for the magic eraser, and for the price I paid for this, I was certainly pleased with the condition. Thanks to the new display and SSD, I had a cheap, fully working 15-inch PowerBook G4 in decent condition. Finally, I wasn't expecting the battery to work at all in this PowerBook, but I found that I could get just over an hour of use out of it. Nonetheless, this still meant that the battery was in need of replacement, and a new unit was ordered. Overall, I was very pleased that I was able to pick this G4 up for such a low price, and with a bit of work and care, was able to restore it back to a decent usable condition. Compared to some of the ridiculous prices that I have seen these PowerBooks go for, I felt that I had a right result here. So as always, thank you for watching. If anyone's got any ideas of things that they'd like to see about this PowerBook in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.